Good morning, Big Square Road to Ruda.com with your morning horn of Z's, your sip of coffee. All right, settle in. There's a lot to talk about this morning because it was 11 years ago today. I'm recording this right before 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock Eastern time, so it was right about now that something happened and our financial system was an electronic run on the banks happened. Nobody knew about it. Nobody talked about it till much later. And then the follow-on 2008 was the September, October, November, December crash of 2008, the bailout of the banks. We know that story. What I want to do is talk about what's going on now, a little bit about back then. I have a new video from Ken Jaworski. What's going on now, and then what it potentially means for the next 3 or 4 months going forward. All right. First of all, here's how we found out about the electronic run on the banks. Senator Ken Jaworski came out, I think it was years later, this one, but I found a new video that came out just 3 or 4 weeks after the event. So let's go back to Ken Jaworski and listen to what he said about the crash in 2008.
Why did we do that? We did that because the secretary, look, I was there when the secretary and the chairman of the Federal Reserve came those days and talked with members of Congress about what was going on. It was about September 15th. Here's the facts, and we don't even need to talk about these things. On Thursday at about 11 o'clock in the morning, the Federal Reserve noticed a tremendous drawdown of money market accounts in the United States to the tune of $550 billion was being drawn out in a matter of an hour or two. The Treasury opened up its window to help. They pumped $105 billion in the system and quickly realized that they could not stem the tide. We were having an electronic run on the banks. They decided to close the operation, close down the money accounts, and announce a guarantee of $250,000 per account so there wouldn't be further panic out there. And that's what actually happened. If they had not done that, their estimation was that by 2 o'clock that afternoon, $5.5 trillion would have been drawn out of the money market system of the United States, would have collapsed the entire economy of the United States, and within 24 hours, the world economy would have collapsed. Now, we talked at that time about what would happen if that happened. It would have been the end of our economic system and our political system as we know it. And that's why, when they made the point, we've got to act and do things quickly, we did. Now, Secretary Paulson said, let's buy out these subprime mortgages. That's what he came to Congress. But he said, give us latitude and large authority to do many things as we decide necessary. And give us $700 billion to do this in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean without a life raft. And we're trying to determine what's the closest shore and whether there's any chance in the world to swim that far. We don't know.
Crazy, right? Absolute craziness. Nobody knew about it at the time. As a matter of fact, let's take a look. What did the Dow Jones do that day? It had a huge up day. September 11, 2008 opened at 11,264 and jumped to 11,445 on a day that the entire system was hours away from imploding. Now, it might not, that's what, 220 point move. Doesn't seem that much today. But back then, look at the percentages. That's equivalent to like a 660 point move on the Dow today. That's a big move on the Dow. Because back then, the total value was lower, 11,002 to 11,004. So nothing was seen. But everything and their mother was going on in the background, which I want to talk about in just a second. But that is not, this Ken Jaworski video right here that I just played you did not take place right then. I think that one was like 2 years later. Or maybe not 2 years, but a long time later. Ken Jaworski did have another interview. And his interview was on October 8th. So it was just 1 month later. And here's the interview right here when he was talking. This is real time.
Well, I think that, I recognize two different elements philosophically in the country. One having a belief that government has a role to play in the country, and the other who believes government is part of the problem in the country. I'm not part of the latter. I think government has a role to play, and I think since the Depression and the stock crash in '29 and the Depression of the '30s, we've seen a very positive role that government can play. What we were able to do this time is do prophylactic activity, not waiting for the results to occur that everybody was of the opinion were going to occur, but to take acts ahead of time. Whether that we've succeeded now, it won't be really known for a considerable length of time, 6 months or a year. I voted for the act to pump money into the system, to buy out bad paper, and to start the financing of the country and the world to go again, because quite frankly, the reports we had received from all of the experts, not only in the government, not only the Secretary of Treasury and the Chairman of the Federal Reserve System, but people who had served in all those capacities in prior administrations, and some of the most renowned economists and financial experts in the academic world and in the business world, said uniformly that action had to be taken. I listened, I analyzed, and I spent 14 hard days in considering all the possibilities of where we could act and what we could do. And I think although this bill isn't perfect by a long shot, it's absolutely essential. And hopefully we can create a barrier, if you will, to stop any further deterioration. And if we don't, that's one of the reasons we would have to go back into emergency session in a very quick time in order to accomplish other things the government can do.
And they didn't. It didn't work. The first bill was voted down. The stock market, over the next 3 or 4 months, the stock market crashed, and we had the big stock market crash. And then it wasn't, obviously, like he said, they went back into committee. What can we do? What's the next thing they can do? They decided, let's rig every single market we can to create an artificial bull market in stocks. And that's what happened in March of 2009. I called it on the day because the president came out and said, we've hit the bottom. All the news media, we've hit the bottom. All the banks, we've hit the bottom. The Fed, we've hit the bottom. Everybody was said it at the exact same day. It was a coordinated effort. And that's how they kicked the can down the road. So now that we have an idea of what happened back then, it wasn't a day, although it was a moment. It was September 11th at 11 o'clock in the morning, which is right about now when I post this video, 11 years ago. It transpired and the public didn't see the ramifications for months. Now, right after that, the Monday after that, Lehman Brothers filed for bankruptcy, and that kicked the ball rolling. Everybody thought, oh yeah, that must have been what started the problems unwinding. And those problems were obviously the mortgage-backed derivatives and the credit default swaps. Those were the two things that they pointed out. Now, that problem is pretty much gone. That is not the problem anymore. The problem is massively bigger than that because they kicked the can down the road, didn't fix any problems, and what happened? Boom, we have the biggest debt bubble in the history of mankind. By far. So the next problem is not going to be $500 billion, $600 billion bailout. It'll be a $20 trillion bailout or more. A derivative bailout, it basically won't happen. And what King Jaworski said, they struggled just to get the $700, $800 billion bailout. That was not easy for them to do as the government. Imagine now that we're smarter, them coming back to Congress and saying, we need 20 trillion. It ain't going to happen. So, all right. Now, what I want to do from here is we are at September 11th, 2019. We're 11 years after. The bad guys and the good guys, they all want to do things on specific days. I have posted at roadruda.com a timeline of when I think things are going to happen, and I've posted 4 updates. This is on the private road, 4 updates of when I think things are going to happen. If you're interested, go to roadruda.com and hit subscribe. But in that timeline, I said the most likely date, a 3% chance of things starting to happen behind the scenes would be today, September 11th, 11 years later. And that's where we are. So let me show you where we are as far as thinking, is there anything, this is what I looked at this morning, is there anything out there that can give us clues as to what is going on behind the scenes, not what is seen in the stock market or the bond market. Remember, the stock market on September 11, 2008 went up the equivalent of 600 points in the day. It was a great day on the stock market. But behind the scenes, everything was breaking down. So that's what I'm looking for. Is everything breaking down? And the best place to look for that is Zero Hedge. Zero Hedge, they're on it. They absolutely find the little tidbits going on behind the scenes. And it was an explosion of tidbits of behind the scenes problems in the financial system, computer problems, trading problems. Let's get into it. First article published last night. Quant quake goes global amid Momo meltdown bond bloodbath. It showed no signs of stopping in today's trading session. You can see these massive moves percentage-wise. I mean, this goes over almost a full year, and look at that, just yesterday, or the last 2 days. Bang, bang, bang. Clearly something is going on behind the scenes. Look at that one. Pure momentum total return index, bang. So, remember, the trading models, the traders, the fast traders love the volatility. The stable markets, the derivative markets can't handle it. So that was the first clue. Second, now this was last night as well. Something big is taking place below the market's surface. The shock of yesterday's U.S. equities factor reversals will go down in infamy alongside the 2007 quant quake and the February, March, April 2016 market neutral unwind as one of the more stunning trades in modern market history. And yet, hilariously, nobody watching financial TV or Joe Schmo retail investor looking at just simple index returns in isolation would have any idea of the calamity occurring under the surface, as it was all about a blowout in the sector and thematic dispersion, which then acted to offset or mask the top-down moves. And they give some good charts here. Like I said, 2008, September 11th, nobody knew what was going on, but there were huge things going on behind the scenes. Same thing is happening right now. Huge things going on behind the scenes, and nobody knows what's going on. I expect the stock market not to have a crash and not to go up crazy. It might go up crazy, I don't know. If it went up the equivalent of 2008, it'll go up 600 points on September 11th. Just below the surface, there's a lot of action. We have several clients' emails on this after the close calling dramatic out moves like this. Russell 2000 up 1.3%, large cap financials 1.5%, momentum stocks down 1.7%. It's just complete. It's completely, there are things behind the scenes going on. Now, is that good or bad? Maybe we've turned a corner. Maybe that's what it is. So let's take a look. Now think about all this stuff going on, right? Trump's saying, oh, the economy's doing great. Let's see what our friend Jamie Dimon has to say. Jamie Dimon, the last night as well. All these stories came out last night. Jamie Dimon on the end of trading. The battle is more in the tech world than in having brilliant traders. Absolutely. I've said it for maybe 12 years now. It's all in the computers. The computer trading derivatives, it's all there. And that's how the system began in the 1960s with Alan Greenspan's programs, and that's how it's going to end. Jamie Dimon on the end of trading. The battle is more in the tech world than having brilliant traders. The world of trading, as generations of traders knew, is over. And it took a timestamp from Jamie Dimon to make it official. Quote, the battle is more in the tech world at this point than having brilliant traders. And so in a world in which being a better trader, i.e. outsmarting everyone else, no longer matters as the market is now hopelessly broken by central banks, and instead just speed and ability to front-run overflow is relevant. It is no surprise that JP Morgan was reserved about its third quarter outlook, which, while set to rise 10% in quarter three, only due to base effect, will continue the recent trend of disappointing trading revenues. We're not jumping for joy, JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon said Tuesday during an investor conference call. Quoted by Bloomberg, the 10% gain is only possible because of Q3 2018 was very weak on a subsequential basis. In Q3 2019, revenue will be have a decline of about 10% versus the already disappointing second quarter. Other banks are set to be even worse. Citibank trading revenue is set to drop this quarter amid the brief bout of volatility that gripped markets in August. Well, what about now? CFO Mark Mason said Monday, Bank of America's fixed income trading revenue will likely be down a bit while equities trading has done well. This is just the start. According to Jamie Dimon, margins will continue to drop across the financial sector as more trades move to electronic platforms as, quote, trading as we once knew it is no more. Is that a big deal? Hell yes. These banks are massively leveraged. Why do you think Jamie Dimon increased the derivative position of JP Morgan $11 trillion in the first quarter of 2019? From $48 trillion to $59 trillion, according to the OCC. I checked the OCC today to see if the second quarter has been released. It has not. I'm very interested in that one and the third quarter and the fourth quarter, if there is a fourth quarter. For old JP Morgan, good riddance. All right, here's the other thing. So we know behind the scenes there's problems. This negative interest rate stuff is destroying the interest rate derivative situation. The largest of all the derivatives is interest rate derivatives. And these are the big banks. And they're freaking out about it. Absolutely freaking out about it. Since 2014, European banks have paid $23 billion to the ECB and now face a disaster. Early this morning, there was added wobble in European bond prices as an unconfirmed M&I report said the ECB could delay the launch of QE on Thursday and make it data dependent, while skeptics quickly slammed the story saying it was just clickbait by market news. It does highlight just how sensitive the bond market is to an announcement of aggressive easing by the ECB when it meets on Thursday, September 12th. Everything is revolving around today, literally, where consensus generally expects significant easing package. But is the easing package good or bad for banks? According to the banks, like Deutsche Bank, UBS CEOs criticize impact of negative rates. Deutsche Bank's Chief Executive Officer Christian Sewing warned that more monetary easing by the ECB is widely expected next week will have, quote, grave side effects, unquote, for a region that has already lived with negative interest rates for half a decade. Grave side effects. Sewing said, in the long run, negative rates ruin the financial system. Guess which way he is betting with his trillions in derivatives. That's where they place their bets. It is gutting Deutsche Bank. Now the third largest. JP Morgan passed up Deutsche Bank as the derivative holder. So did Citibank. Maybe they're taking on the Deutsche Bank derivatives. If they are, you can kiss JP Morgan and Deutsche Bank goodbye. Another cut may make financing cheaper for states, but have grave side effects for the banks. And what's this all doing? What just happened has occurred only 2 days in history. To those who read and took heed of last week's Quant Inside report by Citi, which cautioned that price momentum and low beta outperformed while value underperformed most in August as the equity market turned to risk off again, the low beta has become the most crowded factor in the U.S. because of its historically high valuation and macro risk exposure, and that short interest continues to build in high beta stocks. The trade was a no-brainer. Unwind the best performing year-to-date strategy, blah, blah, blah. Let's look at the 2 days. Look at that chart. Does everything look normal to you? No, it's not normal. There's nothing normal going on right now. Nothing. What happened? Look at this, baby. Nothing normal is happening right now. Now, I'm not saying the stock market is going up or down. I'm saying behind the scenes, there is massive turmoil on the banking side, on the derivative side, on the trading side. And it will all flow into the markets at some point, just like it did in September of 2008. It is absolutely crazy. And why is it so crazy? Debt. So much bigger than mortgage-backed securities. So much bigger than the credit default swaps. The global debt bubble enters its blow-off stage. If you watched my analysis of the second Oz remake movie, Oz the Great and Powerful, it was when the whole sky was falling thing, that was symbolic of the debt bubble, the global debt bubble. That's the next one that needs to be bailed out, and it cannot be bailed out. People have been talking about the debt bubble for some years now. They've been right, of course, based on the combination of surging borrowing and plunging rates. But the bubble hasn't stopped inflating, and recently it entered what sure looks like a terminal blow-off stage. Through July, China's total debt rose by $2 trillion, an year-over-year increase of 26%. In Japan, junk bond market is being constrained by banks so desperate for yield that they're lending directly to companies previously considered too risky. The recent week of corporate bond issuance was the biggest weekly volume to hit global markets on record. Numerous companies issued 30-year bonds with yields below 3%, which used to be a province of safe haven governments. Even Apple, which is sitting on epic pile of cash, borrowed money. Apple is borrowing money. At the end of the spectrum, junk bond issuer Restaurant Brands, which owns the Popeyes and Burger King chains, sold 8.5-year bonds with a coupon under 4%, a record low yield for U.S. junk issuer. In Europe, sales of new bonds hit $1 trillion earlier than any previous year. Fully a third of European investment-grade bonds now trade with negative yields. And the ECB is expected to cut rates further at its upcoming meeting. Why is this happening? 3 reasons. 1, virtually all the world's central banks are now easing, sending interest rates to record lows in most markets. The lure of this ultra-cheap money is proving irresistible even to borrowers who don't immediately need cash. Number 2, the world is looking increasingly scary with trade wars, military brinkmanship in Asia and the Middle East, and a hint of incipient global recession. So a massive cash hoard is increasingly seen as a good thing to have. And number 3, bubbles generally end this way, with everyone just giving up on self-control and grabbing for one last piece of easy money. All 3 of these rationales will probably turn out to be mistaken. But that's just how it goes in financial manias. As the Credit Bubble Bulletin's Doug Nolan notes, quote, "It's difficult to envision a more manic bond environment at home or abroad." So, the bond market is about to pop. The largest market in the world is about to pop. You think there'll be a bailout? I don't. I absolutely don't. And who's poking the bear? Who's ready to lay blame? Mr. Donald Trump. Trump says Fed should cut rates to 0 or less, knowing it would destroy everything. I love it. So U.S. can refinance debt and lengthen maturities. Absolutely. Free money for everybody. Hey, Trump, here's a better idea. Walk over to Steve Mnuchin at the Treasury. Say, hey, Steve, what's up? Hey, Donald, how you doing? Steve, I want you to go over to the mint and tell them to make a coin about this big. Let's make it in gold or silver. And on that coin, I want you to put $100 trillion as the monetary value of that coin. Mnuchin sits there and goes, why? What do you want to put on your desk? He goes, no, I want to use it to pay off the debt. I want to use it to pay off all the debt. And then Mnuchin's jaw drops. You can do that. Absolutely, you can do that. That's the power of the Treasury. Why do you think on the $100 bill, it has all that gold, and then it has that gold fountain pen? The U.S. has the ability to create a $100 trillion coin to pay off all its debt, and then we could pay off the debt of the U.S. citizen as well. Well, that would destroy the faith and confidence in the U.S. dollar. So what? That's what we want to do, destroy the old system. Trump, you don't have to have the Federal Reserve do it. You can do it yourself. Quit your crying, Trump. Go do it yourself. Walk down to Mnuchin's office. Tell him to print out that coin. Print one for yourself, too. That's how insane this whole system is. Everybody's bought into it. It's like a mass global delusion. Yeah. So that's where we are right now. And then you have Christian Sohn freaking out about low rates because they're about to go under. They've made huge derivative bets on the other side. And yes, Deutsche Bank will go under. I don't know if they'll be the first to go under, probably everybody. And now Deutsche Bank tweeted just today on 9/11, quote, "We now predict the Fed will cut rates another 100 basis points over the next several months." Yeah. So there's your update. I think absolutely things are going sideways behind the scenes. Between now and the next, till the end of the year, we're going to see economic chaos. You should absolutely have gold, silver, and cryptos in your own possession. Because when this thing gets really bad and happens the same way in 2008, except it's much bigger, we won't know it at the moment, but we'll know it over the next few weeks. And everybody's going to be rushing their bank to get their cash out. Absolutely get some cash in your hand as well. Small bills, keep it at small bills. Coinage. A quarter will go a long way when no one has any money, at least for a little while. So if you're interested in more, I'll keep everybody updated on the private road, Road to Ruta, and on Patreon. I'll usually post it on the private road first. If you need the most up-to-date information, go to roadtoruta.com. That's your longhorn disease this morning. Keep an eye out. Look for things under the surface. It's not going to be seen in the public just yet. Next week, I do expect to see some more public stuff, maybe some declarations of bailouts or bankruptcies, or between now and the end of the year, definitely a lot of that and more, and keep an eye on that damn bond bubble bursting and the closing of exchanges, because all these computers, all these quants, that's why Jamie Dimon came out and said, oh, traders are gone. It's going to be all computers going like this. That was the start of the system in the 60s and 70s with Alan Greenspan's computer programs, and that's going to be the end of the system because Steve Mnuchin or whoever's in charge of that button can click it and destroy the electronic monetary system. Whew. This is Bix Weir, roadtoruta.com. I'll talk to you guys later.